He did not let her stay out of kindness. Anselm Kovar allowed the woman in apartment 4 to keep her lease because a frightened tenant makes no noise. 16 days before the Pharaoh Accord, a stranger took the one flat that was never meant to be rented. When he put his ear to the shared wall, expecting a listening device, what he heard stopped him cold. She was rehearsing the same words in the dark. By the time he understood who they were for, the accord was dead. The grinder was the loudest thing Anselm Kovar permitted in his building, and even that he ran with a folded towel beneath it to keep the sound out of the floor. It was 5:15 in the morning. Otmar Vey sat at the far end of the counter with the accord open in front of him, reading the clauses aloud in the flat voice of a man reading out a weather report. Clause 14. You attend the dinner at the Pharaoh house. You stand where they put you. You smile at the daughter. I do not smile. Then stand still and let them photograph you not doing it. Anselm poured the water over the grounds in a thin circle and watched the crust rise. 16 days. In 16 days, he would put his name beside Garin Pharaoh's, and the two oldest freight interests in the city would stop bleeding each other in the dark. Her father would call it a joining of houses and mean a merger, and nobody in that room would mistake it for anything else. It was a clean arrangement. Anselm preferred clean things. Otmar closed the folder without argument. He had been closing folders for the Kovars for 40 years. The Harrogate was 6 floors of old mill brick on Kettle Row, and Anselm owned every one of them. He paid the rates on every empty flat in it so that it would stay empty. The building did not make him money, it made him quiet. Under the yard, beneath a hatch that had been a coal chute when the mill still ran, the freight tunnels came up from the canal, and 3 nights a week a lorry rolled in under the arch with its lights off and was emptied in under 10 minutes. A tenant with a window on that yard was not a tenant. A tenant with a window on that yard was a witness. So the flats stayed dark. For 11 years, the door across his landing had stayed shut, and the only footsteps on the 4th floor had been his own. At 6, when Otmar had gone and the sky over the canal had turned the color of dishwater, Anselm heard a van door. He went to the window without hurrying. Below, in the mouth of Kettle Row, a hired van sat with its hazard lights ticking, and a woman was unloading it alone. She was neither young nor old. Dark coat, too heavy for the season, buttoned to the throat. She took the boxes 2 at a time, and when the driver came round to help, she said something short and he went back to his cab. There was no furniture. That was the first thing. No bed frame, no table, no chairs, nothing that needed a second pair of hands. 12 boxes, every one of them small enough for one person to carry, and a black holdall she never put down. Not once, not even to hold the street door. She wore it across her body while she worked. The second thing was the labels. Every box had been taped over on the side, a wide strip of brown tape pressed flat where a name or an address would have gone, and the tape was not new. Those boxes had been packed before, carried before, stripped of their writing before. The third thing came, an hour later, when he heard a drill. Anselm stood in his own hallway, in his socks, and listened to a woman on the other side of his wall, fitting her own chain to her own door, on the first morning, before she had opened a single box. 4 screws. 3 went in clean and the 4th took her a long time, and when it was done she tested the chain twice, slid it, unslid it, slid it again. He had known men who lived like that. He had employed several of them. Not one had ever slept well. He should have made the call. Then, 1 sentence. To Pell, at the letting office, and she would have been gone by the weekend. He did not make the call. At 3 in the morning he was still awake, with the accord in his lap, when he heard her voice come through the wall, not crying. Not speaking to anyone either, because there was no second voice, and no pause of the right shape for a second voice to fit into. Only the same short run of words. Then silence. Then the words again, in a flat, unhurried tone that he recognized, without being able to say from where. Anselm set the folder down on the floor. She said it 7 times before she stopped, and by the 4th he had understood exactly one thing about it. She was not talking to herself. She was practicing. Pell came at 9 with his coat still on and his hat held in both hands. He was a small, careful man who had let the Kovar properties for 19 years, and he stood on the landing looking at the door of apartment 4. The way a man looks at a dog he has been promised is friendly. "I did not let it," he said, before anything had been asked of him. "Somebody did. It came through the office, already approved. It was in the book when I opened the book on Monday." He held out a thin folder. "I would not put a tenant on your floor, Mr. Kovar. I would not put one in this building at all. You have told me the same thing since the day you bought it." Anselm took the folder to the landing window where the light was. 1 year paid in advance. Cash. Receipted over the counter. No bank standing behind it. No employer. Where the references should have been, somebody had written the words, "Not required," in a hand that was not Pell's. The surname on the lease was Price. The first name had been given as a single letter. And at the foot of the page in the small box the agency kept for approvals, there was a counter-signature he knew. He looked at it for a long moment. "Who holds that stamp?" "Your office," Pell said unhappily. "Your office, Mr. Vey, and the account man. Nobody else has ever touched it." Downstairs on the half-landing, Mikkel stood with one shoulder against the wall, listening the way he listened to everything, which was without appearing to. "She goes out in the mornings," he said, when Pell had gone. "Somewhere after 8, I can be inside and out again in 20 minutes, and she will never know a thing happened." "No! Boss, if she was put here they will have wired that flat before her furniture." "She has no furniture." Mikkel absorbed that. Then, before her boxes, behind the door across the landing, faintly, a tap was running. Anselm thought about Thursday. Thursday, the lorry came up out of the tunnel, into the yard with its lights off, and none of that had ever mattered, because in all that time there had been nobody on this floor with ears. Now there was a woman on the other side of a wall thin enough to carry a voice at 3 in the morning. He should have wanted her gone. He noticed, with a coldness that surprised him, that what he wanted first was to know. "Nobody opens that door but me," he said. "Not you, not the account man. Nobody follows her. Nobody so much as holds the street door for her. If she is theirs, I want to know it before she knows I asked." Mikkel nodded once, and went down the stairs. That evening, Anselm put the lease in front of Otmar Vey, and let him read it without saying a word. Otmar read it slowly. He turned it over and read the back, which was blank, and turned it again and looked at the countersignature for a while, and then he set the paper down and smoothed it flat, with the side of his hand. "I will find out how this happened," he said. He picked up his coat. He said good night. He went down the 4 flights at the pace he always did, and Anselm stood at the top of them and listened to him go, and understood, somewhere around the second landing, what had been wrong with the whole conversation. Otmar had not asked who she was. Over the next 4 days, Anselm Kovar learned a woman entirely through a wall. She rose at 4, not sometimes at 4. Every morning, the tap first, and then the kettle, and he came to know the sound her 1 cup made when she set it down on a bare floor. She left at different times, never the same hour. Twice, she never used the front stairs after dark. There was a fire stair at the back of the Harrogate that groaned on the 3rd step from the bottom, and he began to hear that groan at hours he could never predict. She turned no lights on. He worked that out on the 2nd night, standing in the yard looking up at a black window on his own 4th floor. And every night, between 2 and 4, she practiced. He never caught all of it. Brick eats consonants. He got the rhythm. The same run of words with the same 3 stresses, said over and over in that flat, patient tone. One night she went on for the better part of an hour, and Anselm sat on the floor of his hallway with his back against her wall, and did not move, and did not sleep. On the 3rd day he saw her in daylight. She was at the bins in the yard, breaking her boxes down flat, And she still had the coat on. It was warm enough that morning that Mikkel had his sleeves rolled. She worked fast, with her back to the wall, and twice in a minute she looked at the mouth of the arch, not at the yard, at the way out of the yard. Mrs. Ostrand on the ground floor was 81 and missed nothing, and she stopped him on the Friday morning with her door on its chain and her eye at the gap. There was a man asking, she said. Asking what after a woman. Very polite, lovely manners. He had a photograph on his telephone and he held it up nice and steady so I could see it. And he said, had she taken a flat here, and that he was worried about her. Mrs. Ostrand's mouth thinned. He showed me a badge, Mr. Kovar. He showed it before. I asked to see one, which I did not care for. What did you tell him? That there is nobody in this building but you, which is what I have told people since the day he took this building over. She looked at him steadily. He left a card. He said, if she turns up, ring the number and do not tell her I rang. Anselm went up the 4 flights, stood on the landing a while, then knocked. Nothing moved inside, for so long that he had begun to lift his hand again when the lock went, and the door came open the width of the chain. Half a face. Dark eye, no makeup, the coat on indoors, at 10 in the morning. Yes, I own the building, he said. I know. Your name is on the paperwork. The eye did not move off him. Is there a problem with the flat? She did not say it as a question. She was already braced for the answer. No, you are quiet. I came to say you are quiet. Something crossed the visible half of her face and was gone. Thank you, Miss Price, is it? Sunniva, she said, and then went very still, the way a person goes still when they have knocked a glass and are waiting to hear it land. The surname on the lease, she had said back to him flatly. The way you say a word in a language you are still learning. The first name had come out of her before she could stop it, because it was hers, and because a person can put down every other thing they own and still not put down the name they answer to. Anselm, he said, and stepped back, and went into his own flat, and stood in his own dark hallway, with his heart going in a way he did not care for at all. That night, she practiced, and he finally heard it clean, because she said it louder than she had ever said it. I am not going back with you. He sat down slowly on the floor. You do not rehearse that for a burglar. You do not rehearse it for a stranger on a stair, or for any of the 100 things a woman alone in a bad building has cause to fear. You practice it for somebody who has heard your voice 1,000 times and stopped believing it means anything. At 4 in the morning, Anselm went down into the yard, out under the arch and along Kettle Row to where the street bent. A car sat at the curb with a municipal plate, its engine warm, a man in the driver's seat with a paper cup. He was not parked in the dark. He was parked under the light. He was not hiding at all, which meant that on this street, in this city, he had never once had reason to. Mikkel ran the plate the way Mikkel did everything, which was slowly and on no paper. Municipal, he said, 2 days later, standing in the yard with his back to the arch. Pool car out of the Averill Street station, signed out 4 nights running by the same man, always at 10, always back before 6. The sheet has a number where the name goes. Mikkel scratched the side of his jaw. Boss, we pay men out of Averill Street. I know what we pay. Then, whoever is sitting at the end of your road is somebody's colleague, and that somebody takes an envelope from us every month. Anselm looked at the mouth of Kettle Row, where the light fell in a hard white circle on nothing. Do not ask about him, he said. Not at Averill Street, not anywhere. The card Mrs. Ostrand had been given was cheap and thin, and had no name printed on it, only a rank and a telephone number written by hand in small neat capitals. A man who leaves a card without a name has thought about what a card can be used for. Anselm put it in his inside pocket. He did not give it to Otmar Vey. He noticed himself doing that, the way a man notices the first sign of a limp, and he kept walking. Otmar came up on the Tuesday with the audit schedule for the cold stores and stayed longer than the schedule needed. Anything on the woman, he said at the door, with his coat over his arm. Nothing. Nothing is a strange amount to find. She is a tenant, Anselm said. She keeps to herself. He heard how easily it came out of him, and understood that he had just lied to Otmarve for the first time in his adult life, and that he had done it about a woman whose surname he did not believe. Otmar nodded slowly and went out. He did not ask anything else. Odalise Farreau telephoned on the Wednesday, at the hour she always telephoned, and talked for 9 minutes about the dinner and the seating and the photographer her father had engaged. "And the top floor," she said. "I sent a man to measure it, and he was turned away at the street door. There is nothing to measure, Anselm. My father assumes the Harrogate. Your father assumes a great deal." There was a small silence on the line, the kind Odalise used the way other people used raised voices. "It is 8 days," she said. "Do not make it strange." He said something civil, and put the phone down and stood looking at the wall of his own hallway, on the other side of which a woman was rinsing one cup under a tap. Pal came back with the deposit book on the Wednesday evening, because Anselm had asked him for it, and Pal was not a man who asked why. The cash had been counted at the counter, and the counter clerk had noted it, as clerks do. Old notes. Mixed. Several of them soft and damp at the fold, 3 of them taped along a tear, the whole of it made up in bundles of different thicknesses, as though it had been added to over a long time and never once spent. Anselm had handled money all his life. He knew what an operations float looked like, and it looked new, and it looked flat, and it came in one thickness, because a man had drawn it out of somewhere that morning. This was not that. This was a tin under a floorboard. This was every note a woman had been able to keep back for years without anybody noticing. It was gone. He sat with the book open in front of him for a long time. Whatever she was, she had not been sent. Nobody sends an asset who pays with her own life savings in taped notes. Thursday came, and with it the lorry. It rolled in under the arch at 1:10 with its lights off and stood in the yard breathing, and the men came out of the dark and opened it, and Anselm stood at his window in an unlit room and did not watch the lorry. He watched the window of apartment 4. There was nobody behind it. The glass held the yard lights, and nothing else. None of the small changes a room makes in the dark when there is a person inside it. He had heard the 3rd step from the bottom of the fire stair, groan at 9, and had not heard it groan again since. She had gone out before dark, and she had not come home. And she did not come home while the lorry was in the yard, and she did not come home when it left. He stood there with his hands in his pockets and made himself think it through, the whole way to the end. There were 2 kinds of woman who could be absent from her own bed on the one night in the week when the yard below her window was worth watching. One of them had been told when to be absent. It was not the first night the car had come. He had been counting. At 2:20 the car with the municipal plate came slowly down Kettle Row with its headlights off, went past the arch at the speed of a man reading house numbers, and did not stop. She came home at 4:30 on Friday morning, smelling faintly of industrial floor polish. Anselm was on the landing when she came up, because he had put himself there, and she stopped 4 stairs short of the top when she saw him, and did not come any further. "Long shift," he said. "I clean offices." She said it flatly, the way she had said the surname. "At night. Is that a problem with the lease?" "No." "Then good night, Mr. Kovar." She went past him with her key, already in her hand and her shoulder turned, so that she never had her back to him, and the chain went on before her door had finished closing. He stood on the landing and thought about a woman who paid a year of rent out of a tin, and then went out at night to clean other people's offices for cash, and did not stop thinking about it until the sky went gray. The man came at 9:30. Anselm heard the street door, and then the stairs, and he was in his own doorway, with the door open behind him, by the time the man reached the 4th floor, and the man was not out of breath. He was about 40, good coat, better than a public wage, clean shave, clean shoes, an ordinary pleasant face that would be difficult to describe afterwards. He had a folded paper in one hand. "Morning," he said. "Sorry to climb. Are you the owner here?" "I am." The badge came out and went away again. "Quick and easy. A thing done 10,000 times. Then you can help me. I am trying to trace a woman. Not in any trouble. It is a welfare matter. There is nobody in this building but me." That is what the lady downstairs said. He smiled. He had a nice smile, and he used it the way other men used a raised hand. He unfolded the paper and turned it round so Anselm could see the photograph on it. And Anselm looked at a face he had only ever seen half of, through a gap the width of a chain. "She is not well," the man said gently. "She comes off her medication and she believes things about people that are not true. Her family are frantic. Every time it happens, somebody has to find her before something happens to her, and that somebody is generally me. You seem very sure she is on this street." "I am not sure of anything. I am thorough." He folded the paper again along its old creases. "You would be surprised how far a frightened woman will not go. They always stop somewhere. They can watch the door." "You have a card?" "I left one downstairs. Leave me another." The man patted his coat and produced one. Thin and cheap. The same small, neat capitals. "If she does turn up," he said, "the kindest thing you can do is ring that number and say nothing to her. They run when they are warned. Then they end up somewhere a good deal worse than a sound building, with a landlord who keeps an eye out. What is your name?" The pleasant face did not move at all. "Averill Street," he said. "Ask for the officer handling the welfare trace, and they will put you through. Thank you for your time, Mr. Kovar." He went back down without hurrying, and Anselm listened to every step of it. And what stayed with him afterwards was not the badge or the photograph, it was that the man had known his name. Anselm had never given it. He went down and stood in Mrs. Ostrin's doorway for 10 minutes. "If he comes again," he said, "you tell him what you told him the first time in the same words. And then you close the door and you ring me. Do not improve on it." Men like that listen for the improvements. Mrs. Ostrin looked up at him. "She is upstairs, then," she said, and shut the door before he had to answer her. That evening Anselm knocked on the door of apartment 4 and did not say a single one of the things he had come to say. He said, "A man came here this morning, asking after you. He had a photograph. He did not leave a name." Behind the chain, nothing moved. She did not gasp, and she did not ask what he had said, and she did not cry. He heard her breathe out once, slowly. The way a person breathes out when the thing they have been waiting for has finally arrived, and there is a small, terrible relief in the end of the waiting. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "Do you want to know what I told him?" "No." A pause. "It does not matter what you told him." The door closed. At 2 in the morning he heard the sound of packing tape being pulled off a roll, once, and then again, and then again, and again, and again, and again. He lay in the dark and listened to a woman take apart a home she had never finished making, and he did not go to the wall, and he did not knock. He caught her on the fire stair at 4. She came down out of the dark with the holdall across her body and 2 boxes stacked in her arms, moving quietly on the outside edges of the treads, the way somebody moves who has learned which part of a staircase makes noise. And she came round the half landing, and there was a man standing in the alley door below her with the light behind him. The boxes hit the steps. "I am not going back with you." She said it fast and flat and perfectly steady, all of it in one breath, in the exact rhythm he had been listening to through a wall, night after night, and for a moment Anselm Kovar could not move at all. Then the light caught the side of his face and she saw who it was, and every part of her went loose at once, and she sat down hard on the stair, with her arms still up as though the boxes were in them. "It is me," he said. "It is only me." She did not answer. She was shaking so hard he could hear her teeth. He did not touch her. He had walked into rooms full of dangerous men with less thought than he gave now. to keeping his hands open and low and in her sight, and he stayed like that on the cold step until the shaking came down out of her jaw. Anselm crouched down on the step below her, which put his face lower than hers, and put his hands where she could see them, and waited. "You have been practicing that," he said at last. "You could hear it. Only the sound of it. Not the words. I heard the words last night." 11 days, she said. "I have been saying it for 11 days, she laughed. "Once. And it was a terrible small sound. I have been saying it for 4 years. This is only the 11th place. The 11th. 11 flats. 3 cities." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "You want to know why I have no furniture?" Anselm sat down on the cold step and did not say anything at all, and she talked. And once she started, she could not stop, and none of it was what he had spent 2 weeks expecting. She had left the first time with a broken finger and a police report, and the report had gone nowhere, because reports go to a station, and stations are full of men who have known each other since they were probationers. The second time she had left with nothing and told no one, and he had found her in 9 days. The third time she had understood how. He did not hunt her himself. He did not have to. Every time she went, he filed her as a vulnerable person at risk, and the machine did the rest for him for nothing. Her photograph went out on a system she could not see. Her name went into a file that any officer in any city could open in 10 seconds. Hospitals rang it in. Letting agencies rang it in. Once, in the second city, he had telephoned the firm that employed her, and said the words, "concern," and "welfare," and "unwell," in a calm voice to a manager who had known her 5 weeks, and she was let go by the Friday, and she had understood then that he did not need to find her in order to reach her. A woman who gives her real name to rent a flat is a woman who has told him where she sleeps, and a woman who gives a false one is a woman who cannot use a bank, or a doctor, or a wage that goes into an account, which is why she cleaned offices at night for notes in a hand. And when he arrived lawfully, polite, concerned, with paper. And every landlord and every neighbor and every desk sergeant in the country helped him, because he was the one holding the badge and she was the one with no address, no employer, and a history of running. "That is the part nobody believes," she said. "They think you mean he is dangerous. He is not dangerous. He is official." "What are you running to?" She looked at him as though the question were in a language she had never learned. "Nothing," she said. "There is no to. There is the next place where the door is thick and the neighbors are old, and nobody asks me for a bank account." Anselm found that his hands had closed. "His name," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and he watched her decide that it made no difference now. Denholm Sayer. The alley was very quiet. Somewhere out on the canal a hull knocked against a mooring. Twice Anselm knew the name. He had known it for years. It sat on a list he did not keep himself but had signed off on 100 times. A list of men in 3 stations who were paid at the turn of every month to be somewhere else. And Averill Street had 2 names on it, and the older of them was Sayer. He had never met the man. That was the whole elegance of the arrangement. Money left the account man's hand once a month, and certain kinds of attention did not come down Kettle Row, and no Kovar ever had to shake a hand or learn a face. He thought about the car parked under the light at the end of Kettle Row, not hiding. Not once, in 4 nights, bothering to hide. Of course he had not hidden. Kettle Row was a street where he had been paid for a decade not to see anything, and the man who paid him lived on the 4th floor. "You are very quiet," she said. "I am thinking about how he knew to come here. Somebody tells him. Somebody always tells him." "Yes," Anselm said. "Somebody does." He looked up the dark of the fire stair, past her towards a door with a countersignature on its lease that had come out of his own office, from a stamp that 3 men in the world could reach. They went back up the fire stair together, and he carried the boxes, and she let him, which he understood was not a small thing. The flat was as empty as he had known it would be, and worse for being seen. One folding chair, a camping stove on the floor beside the kettle, a sleeping bag squared away in the corner with a pillow set on top of it, made up as neatly as a bunk, a cup, a bowl, a spoon, and a knife, washed and standing on a folded cloth. Nothing on the walls, nothing on the sill. 4 years of practice at owning nothing that could not go down a fire stair in one trip. There is one chair, she said. You can have it, I will stand. She lit the stove and stood over the kettle with her arms crossed, and out over the canal. The sky began to go the color of a bruise that is starting to heal. Ask me, she said. The lease. I wondered how long you would leave that alone. Somebody in my own office put a countersignature on it. 3 men can reach that stamp. I have been trying to work out which of them sold me and how much they got. Nobody sold you. She took the kettle off before it whistled, because she took every kettle off before it whistled. I did it. Anselm stood very still. I clean offices, she said. 9 buildings on my round. One of them is the letting agency on Corbin Street. Tuesdays and Fridays, midnight until 4, alone. With a key they gave me, and a code they wrote on a card and taped inside a drawer, because none of them can remember it. You stamped your own lease. I watched for 3 weeks first. I know which drawer and I know which book, and I know that nobody in that office has read a page of that book in years. She poured the water. I chose a flat that had never been let, because a flat that has never been let has no history for anyone to ring up about. I filled in the form. I put it in the book. In the morning I went in through the front door like anybody else and paid at the counter in cash, and the clerk counted it twice and never once looked at my face. He thought of Pell standing on the landing, with his hat in his hands, wretched, insisting he had not done it. Pell had been telling the truth. Everybody had been telling the truth. Why, the Harrogate, he said. Because of you. Say that again. You think I fell into this building. She wrapped both hands round the cup and did not drink out of it. 4 years, Mr. Kovar. I have learned the machine, the way you learn a language. Refuges keep records, and they are the first place he looks. Hospitals report. A landlord who does everything properly is a landlord who registers you, and a registered tenant is a woman with an address, and an address is the end of it. So there is one kind of building in every city that files nothing and rings nobody, and everyone on a cleaning round knows which ones they are, because the men who own them are the only men in the city who cannot afford a policeman on their stairs. She looked up at him. I asked carefully, for 4 months. Every answer on the north bank came back to the same 6 floors of brick, and not one person I asked would say your name out loud. You chose a criminal. I chose a man who would never call them. Anselm put his hands in his pockets because he did not know what else to do with them. Then you should hear it from me, he said, and not from a story on a cleaning round, and he told her. The tunnels under the yard and where they came out, the lorry and what came off it, and how often and what it was worth. The years of quiet and the envelopes at the turn of every month that bought it. He did not make any of it sound better than it was, and he watched her face the whole time, waiting for the thing that always happened to people's faces. It did not happen. I know what you are, she said when he had finished. I did not blunder into you, I aimed. He looked at the tin money in the deposit book in his mind, damp at the folds, taped along the tiers. Pell will return the year's rent to you this week. No. You paid a man to let you be safe in a building he already owns. Take it back. If I take it back, I am a woman staying somewhere for nothing. And a woman staying somewhere for nothing is a woman who can be told to leave at an hour's notice. Her voice did not rise at all. I would rather have the receipt. He let it go because she was right, and because he was beginning to understand that she had thought about every single thing in her life for 4 years without one person to think about it with. Then hear the rest, he said. The street door has a new lock from this afternoon. Nobody comes up these stairs who has not come past Mickle first. Mrs. Ostrin telephones me, and not the number on that card. And if you decide to go, I will drive you myself, and I will not ask you where, but you will not be going because somebody made you." She looked into the cup for a while. "What is in the bag?" he asked. It was still on her shoulder. In her own flat, with the door locked and the chain across it, the hold-all was still on her shoulder. "Nothing you need," she said. He looked at the strap, where 4 years of carrying had worn a shine into the shoulder of her coat, and did not ask again, and put the question away in the place where he kept the things he intended to come back to. Mikkel came up at noon with a folded paper that had been handed to him at the street door by a courteous young man in a stab vest. It was an order to enter, granted on the application of an officer of the Averill Street Station, in respect of concern for the welfare of a person believed to be residing at the Harrogate, Kettle Row. It named the building. It named the owner. It was signed by a magistrate, and there was nothing anywhere on it that a man like Anselm Kovar could argue with, because everything on it was lawful. The hour written on it was 8 in the evening. The day written on it was Thursday. Thursday was the night of the Pharaoh dinner. Thursday was the night the lorry came up out of the tunnel into his yard. He did not furnish the flat for her. He asked her first, which was not a thing he had done for anyone in a long time. "A chair," she said. "A second chair, if you are going to keep standing in my kitchen." 2 chairs came up, and a table, and a lamp, and a bed. She stood in the middle of the room and looked at the bed for a long time without saying anything at all, and Anselm understood, too late to take it back, exactly what he had done. A chair can go down a fire stair. A table can be left. A bed cannot be carried by one woman at 4 in the morning, and so a bed is a thing you only accept if you have decided to still be there in the morning. "It is only a bed," he said. "No," she said. "It is not." "Then have it taken out again." She did not answer that, and she did not move for a while, and then she sat down on the edge of it with her hands in her lap, upright and careful, like a woman visiting somebody in hospital. Odalise Farrow arrived at 10:30 with a tape measure in her handbag and a designer in her car. She came up the 4 flights in shoes that were not made for them, and she was standing on the landing with her breath in order and her face arranged when the door of apartment 4 opened and a woman came out with an empty cup in her hand. The two of them looked at each other for about 2 seconds. "Ah," Odalise said. Sunniva went back inside and closed the door without a word. "How long?" Odalise asked. "Nothing has happened. That is not what I asked you." She put the tape measure back in her handbag and closed it with a small, definite click. "I am not a fool, Anselm. I have never once been a fool. I have been a woman being merged with a set of tunnels and a license. And I have been perfectly willing, because the alternative my father had in mind for me was worse and duller." She looked at the closed door. "She has no furniture in there." "She has a bed." "Yes," Odalise said. "I saw the van." She started down the stairs and stopped at the turn. "My father will hear about her by 6. He will hear it from me, because he will hear it better from me than from whoever else. He has, watching this street. And there is somebody. Do what you are going to do before he does." That night Sunniva put the hold-all on the table between them and opened it. There was a plastic wallet of papers, soft at the corners. There were 3 photographs, one of them, of 2 women, squinting into the sun on a pier somewhere, taken by a stranger who had not managed to get their feet in. And there was a wooden box about the size of a loaf, plain, with a screwed brass plate on the lid, and she set her hand flat on it and left it there. "Seen," she said. "My sister. She was older by 5 years. She was the one who told me to go. She said it for 2 years before I listened. She kept the tin for me at her flat, and she put money in it every week out of her own wages, and she never once asked me to pay it back. And when I finally went at 2 in the morning with a bag, she stood in her doorway and told me not to write, not ever, because he would read anything I sent her." "And you did not write?" "I did not write." Her thumb moved once on the lid of the box. "She died 14 months ago. Very fast. Nobody's fault. She was 51. The room was quiet. The funeral was in the first city, she said. I got there. I was in a car park across from the chapel with the engine running. She stopped and started again. There was a car outside the chapel with a man in it, and a paper cup on the dashboard, and he was there when I arrived, and he was there when they carried her out, and I sat in that car park for 2 hours, and I did not go in. Anselm did not say anything, because there was nothing that was not an insult. There are only 3 photographs, because I burned the others in a sink in the second city, she said. He had written on the back of one of them. Nothing frightening, just my name, in his hand, on a picture of my sister. I could not have it in the bag after that. They gave me the box afterwards. A woman from the crematorium met me at a service station off the motorway and handed it to me in a bag for life. She laughed. The same terrible, small laugh. I have carried her ever since. That is what is in the bag. That is why I do not put it down. I cannot bury her anywhere, you see, because you cannot bury somebody in a place you are never allowed to come back to. I would be leaving her in a town I could never visit. I have thought about it in 11 flats, and I have never been able to do it. Anselm looked at the box for a while. My mother is in the churchyard at St. Cleer. Out past the reservoir, he said. Covers have had that ground for 4 generations. My father is there. 2 of my uncles are there. It is a wall and a gate and a man who cuts the grass. And it will be there in 100 years because the family bought it outright and nobody can move us. Why are you telling me that? Because you said, a place you can come back to, he said. I am telling you that such a place exists and that I own one. She did not answer him. She sat with her hand on the lid. The flat was warm that night because he had put the building's heating on for the first time since he had owned it and had not mentioned it. At some point, without stopping talking, she stood up and took off the coat and hung it on the back of one of the new chairs. She did not put it on again all evening. She did not seem to notice that she had not. Anselm noticed and said nothing at all and understood that he was in a great deal of trouble. At midnight, Mikkel telephoned from the car. Boss, he said, Mr. Vay's car has been outside the Faro house since 7. Anselm went to Guernfaro the next morning, in daylight, through the front door, with Mikkel left standing in the hall. It was a good house, 300 years of it, and it had the particular hush of a place where nobody has ever carried anything upstairs themselves. Guerin took him into the long room at the back with the river in the windows, and there were 4 other men in there, and Guerin did not send any of them out, which told Anselm everything about how the meeting was expected to go. 3 days, Guerin said. Sit down. I am not signing the accord. The room went very still. One of the 4 men put down a cup. Say that again, Guerin said. I am not signing it on Thursday, and I am not signing it in a month. And I am not going to insult you by pretending it is about the auditors or the tariff or the wording of Clause 9. Anselm stayed on his feet. It is off. Today. I will pay whatever the paper says I owe you for the withdrawal, and I will pay it this week. One of the 4 men, a lean one with a folder, began to say something about the penalty schedule and the exposure on the tariff side. Gren lifted one finger off the arm of his chair, and the man stopped talking as though a switch had been thrown. Guernfaro was 70 years old and had not got there by shouting. He leaned back and looked at Anselm with an expression that was almost affectionate. You know what I was buying, he said. Say it. The tunnels under Kettle Row. Not your cold stores, which are a nuisance, and not my daughter's happiness, which she has never once asked me to consider. 400 yards of dry brick that comes up inside a private yard on the north bank. Guerin turned his cup on its saucer. I have wanted it since your father was alive. It was promised to me. By whom? You know by whom, or you would not have come here with your face like that. Guerin's eyes were flat and old and interested. He told me you would come round to it. He told me you were tired and that a tired man signs. He has been telling me that for 11 months, and telling me for just as long that he speaks for the house. Anselm's voice came out, perfectly level. He does not speak for the house? No, Garen agreed. He turned the cup back the other way. Is it a woman? Yes. Well, Garen said, and for a moment he looked genuinely, distantly amused, the way old men do at weather they have seen before. I had a bet with myself on the way down the stairs. I said to myself, it will either be a woman or he has finally read the clause about the auditors properly. Does she know what you are giving up? She has told me twice not to give it up. Then she is cleverer than my daughter and considerably cleverer than you. Garen set the cup down. Thursday still comes, Mr. Kovar. I have paid for Thursday. I am not going to unpay for it, because you have discovered a feeling. At the door, Odalis was waiting with her arms folded, and she walked him out to the hall herself. You could have telephoned it, she said. No, she agreed. You could not. She stopped by the coats. For what it is worth, I was going to go through with it, and I would have made a decent job of it, and you would never have been unkind to me. That is not nothing. It is only not anything. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. Be quick. She opened the door for him herself, which the house had staff for. My father does not shout, and he does not threaten. He simply arranges for the thing he wants to become the only thing available. Thursday will still happen. Anselm. He has already paid for it, Anselm told Sunniva that evening, standing in her kitchen, and he told it plainly and without decoration, because she had earned plainness. I ended the Pharaoh Accord this morning. She put both hands on the back of the chair. Because of me. No. He said it hard. Because this was the one thing he was not going to let her carry. Listen to me. I have spent a year buying a thing I did not want from a man I do not like, to fix a problem I made myself by being comfortable. You did not cost me that. You are the reason I finally looked at it. Those are different, and I am not going to let you sit up at night confusing them. She was quiet for a while, turning a chair round so that she could sit on it backwards, the way she did when she was working something out. He will not leave it, she said. No. They never do. That is the thing about the polite ones. They are not in a hurry, because they have never once been made to be. Mikkel came up at 9, with his coat still wet. 2 of them gave the envelopes back, he said, this month, handed them over at the door, and would not take them in. One of them would not even open his mouth to say why, which stations, both from Averill Street. So, the word was out, and had gone round in a day, which meant somebody had put it round, and there was only one man on the north bank with any reason to. Then we are on our own from tonight, Anselm said, and he was not as frightened by it as he ought to have been, and wondered what that said about the last decade. At 9:20 his telephone rang, and the number was not one he knew. Mr. Kovar, said a pleasant voice, I do apologize for the hour. You have the advantage of me, Anselm said. I doubt that very much. There was a smile in it. There was no hurry in it. I will not keep you. I understand there was some unpleasantness at the Pharaoh house this morning, and I thought it was worth one telephone call before Thursday, because I do not think anybody has explained to you properly what Thursday is. Explain it then. At 8 o'clock, I come to the Harrow Gate with 2 officers and a lawful order, and I look for a vulnerable woman I have every reason to believe is inside. At 1 in the morning, a vehicle enters your yard. Those 2 facts are not related, Mr. Kovar, but they are going to happen on the same premises within 5 hours of each other, and I want you to picture how that reads on paper afterwards. A pause, pleasant as a hand on a shoulder. Or, you telephone me on Wednesday. She goes home to her family, where people who love her can look after her properly. The order gets withdrawn because the concern is resolved. And on Thursday night nobody official is anywhere near Kettle Row, exactly as has been the case for 11 years. And everybody carries on. Anselm looked at the wall. You have taken money from my house since I was 24 years old, he said. I have taken money from a great many houses. It has never once made me anybody's employee. The voice did not harden. It simply became very slightly clearer. You are not the first man to think that paying me made me his. You are only the first one who ever had something I wanted. You have been on that list since my father ran it. I have been on a great many lists. It is a filing cabinet, Mr. Kovar, not a marriage. The voice remained perfectly warm. And you have never asked yourself what a man in my position actually sells. What I sell is attention. I decide which premises in this city are interesting this year, and which are not. And the price of not being interesting has been reasonable for a decade and more, and you have paid it without ever having to look at me. That has suited us both. She is not a thing, no, Sayer agreed. She is a filing. And the beautiful part, Mr. Kovar, the part I do not think you have grasped yet, is that I do not have to be right. I only have to be the one with the paperwork. The line went dead. Anselm sat with the telephone in his hand. Then he went and got Otmar Vey. Otmar came at 10:30 and did not pretend, which Anselm was grateful for afterwards, when he could be grateful for things again. He came up the 4 flights and took his coat off and hung it where he always hung it. And Anselm found that he could hardly look at him for the ordinariness of it. How long? Anselm said. 11 months. Otmar put his hat on the table. He looked old in a way he had not looked the week before. I told Garin the tunnels would come to him with the accord. I told him you would sign. I meant it when I said it. They are not yours to promise. No. They were your father's, and then they were yours. And I have watched you carry them for the 11 years since your father died. The way a man carries a bag he has been told not to put down. Otmar's hands were flat on the table. We are old, Anselm. The lorry is old. There are 4 families on this river, and 3 of them will be gone in 10 years. And I did not want you to be the interesting one. Furrow is a pig, and Pharaoh is going to be here in 20 years, and I wanted you inside his house when the weather changed. That is all of it. There is no money in it for me. You can look. I know there is no money in it for you. Anselm's throat hurt. That is what makes it worse. If you had been bought, I could have put you in a car and sent you somewhere warm and told myself a story about you. You were not bought. You looked at my life and you decided it was finished, and you went and made arrangements for it, and you did it the way you have done everything for 40 years, which is quietly and without asking me. Yes, Otmar said. The woman, Anselm said, and that was when it stopped being about tunnels. I told him, Otmar said, the week she arrived. There was a man asking at Corbin Street about a tenancy in one of our buildings. And my name came up because my name comes up, and I telephoned Averill Street and I said there is a woman in the Kovar building on Kettle Row and she should not be there, and would somebody kindly come and take her away quietly? He looked at his hands. I thought I was having a squatter removed. I thought I was tidying. I have thought about it every night since you stood in this room and lied to me about her. You never asked me her name. I was afraid you would tell me, Otmar said. Anselm stood at the window for a long time. Go home, he said at last. Do not come to the yard. Do not come to the office. I cannot look at you, Otmar, and I do not know yet whether that is a thing that passes. Otmar took his hat and went, and on the landing he stopped and said, without turning round, it was a good lie you told me about her. It only had one thing wrong with it. And then he went down the 4 flights at the same pace as always, and Anselm listened to him go for the last time. Suniva was the one who broke it. She sat at her own table at 1 in the morning with a pencil and the back of a delivery note, and she took the machine apart out loud, the way a mechanic takes an engine apart on a bench. And Anselm and Mikkel sat and listened to a night cleaner explain the exact load-bearing weakness in the whole apparatus that had eaten 4 years of her life. It only works because I am missing, she said. Everything he does hangs off one filing, a vulnerable adult, whereabouts unknown, believed at risk. That is the hook the order hangs on, and the reason a magistrate signed it, and the reason the machine works for free. So take the hook out. How? I stop being missing. She said it and then had to stop and breathe, because saying it was not the same as thinking it. Not quietly, not to him. I walk into Averill Street Station, in daylight, on my own feet, with a solicitor beside me, and I give my name and my address, and I say, I am not missing, I have never been missing, and I do not consent to being traced, and I make them write it down. In front of a room, in front of his own people. Her hands were shaking on the delivery note. After that, every single thing he files is a lie, with my signature sitting next to it in the same building. Mikkel let out a slow breath. The order still stands for Thursday, Anselm said. Then let him come. She looked up. What is he going to find? And that was the second half of it, and it was the easiest part. Because it was the part Anselm had known how to do since he was a boy. Nothing. He would find nothing. The lorry would not come up out of the tunnel on Thursday, and the hatch under the yard would be dry and closed and full of nothing at all, and the yard would be swept, and the fourth floor would hold 2 chairs, a table, a lamp, a bed, and a woman with a stamped receipt for a year's rent and a solicitor's letter in her hand. They found Bettina Rue on the Tuesday morning, in a 2-room office above a shop, because Seneva refused every large firm on the grounds that large firms have friends. Miss Rue was about 60, with reading glasses on a chain and a kettle in the corner, and she listened to the whole of it without once interrupting, and at the end she took her glasses off and said, "Write 2 things. You will not go in there alone and you will not go in there angry, because angry is the only word he needs them to write down." Then she wrote out, in longhand, on lined paper, the exact form of words Sunniva was to say at the desk, and made her read it aloud 4 times, until it stopped shaking in her mouth. "Another one to learn," she said. "No," Miss Rue said, "the last one." "And the envelopes," Mikkel said, "on Wednesday." "The list. Stop them," Anselm said. "All of them, every station, this month and every month after." Mikkel went to fetch the ledger from the account man, and telephoned Anselm at 3 in the afternoon, from a flat in the east of the city, with the door standing open. The account man was gone. Not taken. Gone, in the way of a man who is packed, no coat on the hook, 3 hangers on the floor and the door left standing open behind him. The ledger was not in the flat. 11 years of entries. 2 names at Averill Street. Dates and sums in a clerk's careful hand, in a book that was the only paper in the city that could hurt Denholm Sayer, and the only paper in the city that could hurt the Kovars, and that was now wherever a frightened man had decided to put it. Thursday came in gray, and stayed gray. Nobody in the building slept. Mikkel had men in the yard from 4 in the morning, with brooms and a hose, doing the strangest work of their lives, which was making a place look exactly as innocent as it actually was. At 10 in the morning, Seneva Price, who had been born with another surname entirely, walked into the Averill Street station through the public door with Bettina Rue at her left shoulder and Mikkel 3 steps behind and the wooden box in the holdall across her body, because she was not going to leave it in a flat on the day the police were coming to it. Anselm waited outside on the pavement, because a man like him inside a police station on that particular morning would have been the only thing anybody remembered afterwards. That had been her ruling, not his. He had not liked it. He had done what he was told. It took 40 minutes. What happened inside? He heard afterwards in pieces from Mikkel, who had watched it from a plastic chair by the notice board. She gave her name at the desk, her real one, out loud, in a room with 6 people in it. Bettina Rue put a letter on the counter and asked, politely, for the officer dealing with the welfare trace, and asked, as politely, for the name of the duty inspector, and wrote both of them down where the sergeant could see her writing them. And then Denholm Sayer came through the door at the side of the counter with a folder under his arm, because somebody had gone and told him, and he stopped when he saw her. Mikkel said afterwards that the thing he would remember for the rest of his life was that the man smiled. Not a flicker first, not half a second of anything else. He smiled the way you smile at a friend you have spotted across a room. "Seneva," Sayer said, warm as a hand on the back of the neck. "Thank God." Everyone has been so worried. The room was listening. Two officers at the desk, a sergeant, a woman waiting about a dog license, a young constable by the notice board, and Suniva, who had rehearsed one sentence in the dark for 11 days in 11 flats over 4 years, who had set it into a wall at 3 in the morning until the shape of it wore smooth, looked at him in the middle of his own station in front of his own people and said it. "I am not going back with you." Nobody moved. Somewhere behind the counter, a printer started up and ran for a few seconds and stopped. And it was the loudest thing in the room. "I am not missing," she said to the sergeant. "Not to him. I have an address. It is written on that letter. I have a tenancy and a receipt and a solicitor. And I am here of my own free will, and I am asking you to record that I am not missing and that I do not consent to being traced. And I would like a copy of what you write." The sergeant looked at Sayre. Afterwards, that was the part that Anselm made Mikkel tell him 3 times, because it was the whole thing in 1 second. The sergeant looked at Sayre, and Sayre had to stand in the middle of the room with a folder under his arm and be, for the first time in 4 years, a man who was being watched while he decided what his face was going to do. "Of course," Sayre said. "Whatever she is comfortable with," they wrote it down. Bettina Rue read it upside down while they wrote it and made them change 2 words and took her copy and said, "Thank you very much." And they walked out past him into the gray morning, and Suniva got 15 steps up the pavement before her legs went, and Anselm caught her by both arms and held her up, and she did not cry then either. She laughed once. Into his coat, appalled at herself. "It was so quiet," she said. 4 years, and it took 40 minutes. And nobody even raised their voice. At 8 o'clock that evening, the order was executed on the Harrogate. Denholm Sayre came through the street door with 2 uniformed officers and a paper in his hand, and Anselm Kovar met him in the hallway with the lights on and every door in the building standing open. They went up. Sayre looked at the empty 2nd floor and the empty 3rd. He looked into apartment 4, where a woman sat at a table with a lamp on and a solicitor's letter squared in front of her and did not stand up. And he asked her twice, gently, in front of the officers, whether she felt safe. And she said yes. And he asked whether she was free to leave the building if she wished, and she said yes. And one of the officers wrote it down and looked faintly embarrassed to be there. Then Sayre asked to see the yard. The yard was swept. The hatch was up, and the tunnel was open, and it was empty for 400 yards. And it was dry. And there was a card table down there, with a thermos on it, where 2 of Anselm's men had been sitting all evening, playing cards, in the light, waiting to be found. Garin Farrow's auditors, who had been invited to attend at 8 and had come because Garin had told them to, stood in the yard in the drizzle in good coats and watched a police lieutenant look into a hole in the ground and find nothing in it at all. One of them checked his watch twice. The other took no notes, which was its own kind of report, and Anselm knew that by the morning Garin Farrow would have been told, in the careful language such men use, that the thing he had paid for had happened exactly on schedule and had come to nothing. The officers went. Sayre stayed on the 4th floor landing, in the place where he had once stood with a folded photograph. "Ledgers," he said conversationally. "Your account man came to me on Monday, you know. Frightened little creature. He seemed to feel that a decade of entries with my name on them would be of interest to somebody." "He came to you," Anselm said. "Yes, I know, and you have nothing." "No. No." Sayre nodded slowly. "Then this is theater, and you have wasted a great deal of money on it, and next month or the month after there will be another filing, and it will be very ordinary, and one morning there will be nobody at that table." "Perhaps," Anselm said. He had thought about this on the stairs for 2 days, and had decided that there was no clever version of it, and that a man like Sayre had heard every clever version there was. "Here's the other thing, though, and I want you to take it seriously, because you have never once had to. I have cancelled the accord. I have put down the lorry. I have sent away the man who taught me my trade. There is not a thing left in my life that you can threaten. And I have discovered in the last 2 weeks that I do not want any of it back. He did not raise his voice at all. You are a man who has spent his whole career being paid not to be looked at. If you file one more piece of paper with her name on it, I will spend everything I have left making you the most looked at man in this city, not the courts, not your friends at Averill Street. Every newspaper on the river, every inquiry, every hearing, for the rest of my life, it will cost me all of it. Look at me and decide whether you think that stops me. The stairwell was very quiet. For about a second and a half, the pleasant face was not there. And something underneath it looked out and measured him, the way one professional measures another. Then the door at the bottom of the stairs opened, and Otmar Vey came in out of the rain, with a hat in one hand and a leather ledger under his arm. He came to me on Monday night, Otmar said. Not to you, because he was ashamed, and not to the police, because he is not a fool. He came to me because I have been the man you go to in this family for 40 years. He glanced at Sayre without much interest. He had been to you first that afternoon, and frightened himself so badly doing it that he was at my door by midnight with the book inside his shirt. He put the ledger on the bottom stair and did not offer it to anybody, and stepped back from it. 11 years of entries, he said to nobody in particular. 2 names at Averill Street, dates, sums, initials in a clerk's hand. I have read all of it twice. Sayre looked at the ledger on the stair for rather a long time. That implicates your house as much as it implicates me, he said. Yes, Otmar agreed. I have explained that to him, and he does not care. And I have been trying for a week to understand why, and I think I have it now. He looked up the stairs at Anselm, and his face was very tired, and not at all sorry. It is because you have finally found the one thing you would rather have than the yard. Nobody said anything. Denholm Sayre put his hands in his coat pocket. He looked at the ledger and at the old man who had brought it, and up the stairwell at Anselm, and he did the arithmetic that men like him always do. And Anselm watched him arrive at the answer. Good evening, Mr. Kovar, he said, and went out into the rain, and the street door swung shut behind him. He filed nothing. Not that month, and not after. In the spring there was a review of overtime and vehicle use at the Averill Street station, prompted by a letter from a 2-room solicitor's office above a shop, and Denholm Sayre was moved to a desk in an administrative unit in a building with no public counter, where he signs for stationery, and where every hour of his working life is now written down by somebody else. Garin Farreau telephoned on the Friday morning. You embarrassed my auditors in a wet yard, he said. I did. You are also, as of this morning, a man with no accord, no police arrangement, and no lorry. Garin sounded almost cheerful about it. So, what is it you want, since I know you did not do all this to be poor? The cold stores at Saltmarsh, Anselm said. Not the tunnels. The tunnels are closed and they are staying closed. And I will fill them with concrete this year and send you the photographs. But you have wanted a legitimate cold chain on the North Bank for a decade, and you cannot get planning for one, and I have 4 of them standing empty and a license that is 50 years old. There was a pause on the line of exactly the kind Odelize used. You are offering me a business, Garin said. I am offering you the only thing I have left that is worth anything, and it is worth a great deal, and it is legal, and I want a great deal of money for it. They argued about the price for 9 days. Odalice did most of the arguing, and she was better at it than her father, and when it was signed she shook Anselm's hand in front of the photographer, who had originally been engaged for a wedding, and said quietly, This is the version where I run something, and he understood that she had come out of it better than either of them had expected. Otmar Vey went south in April. He did not ask to be forgiven, which Anselm thought was the most decent thing he had ever done. He writes on the 1st of every month, 1 page, about the weather and a dog he has acquired. And Anselm answers about half of them, and it is not what it was, and it is not nothing, and neither of them pretends otherwise. The chain stayed on the door of apartment 4. Anselm never asked her to take it off. That was the one thing he was certain of, that a man who had spent his life arranging people would arrange nothing at all about this. He did not move her upstairs. He did not fill her rooms. He did not fund anything, or mandate anything, or pay off a single one of her problems while she was out of the room. She bought a rug with her own wages and got the color wrong and kept it out of pure stubbornness, and it was the ugliest thing in the building. And he never touched it. On a Saturday at the end of May, they drove out past the reservoir to the churchyard at St. Clear. It was a small stone yard behind a wall, with a gate that a man opened for them, and the grass had been cut. There were Kovars along the north side going back 4 generations. And there was room left, because the family had bought the ground outright, and nobody could move them. They buried Sinya there on a bright, cold morning, in the corner by the wall where the light comes over first, and Anselm had the stone cut with her full name, and her dates and one line underneath, and the line was Sineva's, and it took her 4 days to decide on it. She came here. Afterwards they stood at the gate and looked back at it, and Sineva said, "I can come back," in the flat, careful voice she used for facts, and then said it again, and the second time it came apart in the middle. "Whenever you like," Anselm said. "It is a wall and a gate, and a man who cuts the grass. It will be here in 100 years. The coat hangs on a hook now by the door, which is what coats are for." He knocked on her door on a Tuesday evening in June, with 2 bags of shopping, the way he had done twice a week since the spring, and stood on the landing, and listened, out of habit, for the sound of the chain going across. It did not come. The door opened all the way straight off, with nothing between them at all, and she stood there, with her hands empty, and looked at him. "You did not put the chain on," he said. "No, Sineva. I know." Her chin went up. "In that way it did. I have thought about it for a week. Do not make a thing of it." Anselm Kovar, who had been called many things on the North Bank, and most of them accurate, stood in his own building holding 2 bags of shopping and could not think of one single word. "I had a sentence for 4 years," she said. "I set it in 11 flats, and I set it into your wall, and I set it to his face in his own station, and I have not needed it since, and I have been trying all week to work out what a person says instead, when there is nothing left to be ready for." She let go of the door. "I could not find anything, so I thought I would just open it." He put the bags down on the landing. "That will do," he said. "There is no version of this in which he became a good man. He is not one. He is quieter than he was, and he pays tax on a cold chain, and there is concrete in the tunnels under the yard, and there are men on the river who will tell you that Anselm Kovar was ruined by a cleaner in a heavy coat, and he lets them say it because it saves him having to explain that she was not ruining anything. She was the first person in 11 years who came to that building on purpose. The Harrogate has tenants now. All 6 floors, properly registered, with names in a book and rent going through an account like anybody else, which Pell found so upsetting that he had to be taken out for a drink about it. There is a bicycle in the hallway that somebody keeps leaving where it should not be, and a baby on the 2nd floor that cries at 4 in the morning, and Mrs. Ostrin knows all of their names and most of their business, and none of them can understand why the landlord is so particular about the locks. He has had every lock in the building changed twice, and he will change them again, and not one of them has ever asked him to explain it. She never did take the year's rent back. She has the receipt in the plastic wallet with the photographs, and she says she is keeping it because it is the first thing she ever bought with money her sister put in a tin, and what she bought with it was a door she was allowed to come back through. That is the whole of it. A locked door is not a home. A home is the place they let you come back to, and some people spend 4 years learning that the hard way, and some people spend 11 years living next to it without ever once opening theirs. If this one got you, do me a favor before you go. Tap the like button, subscribe, And tell me down in the comments where you were when she said it in the middle of that station, because I have a feeling I know. And if you have ever had to be brave in a very quiet way, in a room where nobody raised their voice, this one was for you. I will see you in the next story.